Good afternoon, and welcome to the latest Don't Valley Lit Fest author session. And I'm delighted that I've got Malcolm joining us today from Yorkshire. But I think in his background, I think we'll be going from Yorkshire to Egypt and around. And I'll let him explain a little bit more about that. That shows I have read his bio. Um, so I'm looking forward to this very much. Um, Basically, I'm looking forward to hearing his story about how he actually got into writing, etc., and also to understand how he goes about his writing and so forth. And he's kindly got at least two, maybe three readings to do as well as we go through as well. We'll be asking a few questions as we go. So I'm going to let Malcolm sort of do an introduction to himself and do a first reading, and then we'll sort of have a bit of a question and answer bit in the middle just to break it up a little bit. So thank you for agreeing to do this today, Malcolm, and
It's a pleasure.
over to you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Yeah, my name is Malcolm Hollingdrake. I write two series. I write the Merseyside series, which is the later of the two, and the Harrogate crime series. The Harrogate crime series now comprises 11 books. Originally, I was born in Bradford. I'm a Yorkshireman, and I lived 18 years in Bradford before moving over to Ripon for teacher training college. Spent 3 years there, well, a short time in Bingley, where my first teaching post was, and then I married a Lancashire lass, so moved across to Wigan. Being a teacher, I've taught for 32 years, and within that time, I think I've always been a writer. I wrote stories for children, usually assembly stories. I was never a great believer in reading stories. I was a great believer in telling stories. And so to captivate an assembly of 300 plus kids, I would learn the story and tell it. And I found that worked very, very well. Within that career, brought about quite a lot of changes because I worked in Cairo for a while as a senior teacher of 1,000 pupil primary school, an English medium school. And then because of troubles over there, we moved and we ended up in northern Cyprus, Turkish Cyprus, in the 80s. My wife taught there, but I'd taken 2 years leave of absence from the teaching authority I was with at the time. And I decided to concentrate a little bit on the art side. But it's funny when you always look forward to having time on your hands and think, well, I'll be able to fill that quite considerably. But realistically, I missed the teaching. I missed the communication with people. So I came back, although my wife stayed there, and we travelled out. I travelled out on holiday every break I had. And it was at that time, while I was in Northern Cyprus, the idea for a book came to me. Northern Cyprus doesn't have an extradition procedure. It didn't at the time. So any criminal from the UK could land on the shores and they couldn't be sent away. And we know that from Polly Peck and Aslan Nadir, who flew there and quite happily lived the rest of his days there. And also at the time, the Gulf War had been going on, and Gulf War syndrome. So I decided to create a book based around those two elements, and Engulfed was written. Self-publishing then wasn't easy. So I contacted a company who actually published it for me. And really, it sat on the shelves of Amazon for quite some time. I think it's down the back of the shelf at Amazon. But I enjoyed the process, and I then started to write short stories. And what really kicked me off was I won a short story competition in a Lancashire magazine. You had to include as many names of Lancashire towns as possible within the 500 words, or was it 1,000 words? I can't remember. And with 20 minutes sitting on the settee, I'd finished it and I sent it to my wife, who's an English specialist. So I asked her what she thought. And she said, had I just written that? Hang on. I said, yeah, it's just flowed. So we sent it in and I heard nothing for quite some time. And then I got a phone call one Friday evening from the editor of the magazine to say that my short story, Another Time, Another Place, had been considered the best of the bunch, and I won, I think, £250 and a subscription to the magazine. And that gave me the confidence then to think, well, maybe I'm not as I've got something there that I can use. And I was coming up towards the end of my teaching career. I loved Harrogate, always have done. My grandparents, well, my grandfather was born near Ramsgill. We'd always travel through Harrogate as a kid. We'd been up there at weekends. So I decided that Harrogate was the perfect place. And I'd read that it was the happiest place in the UK to live. So I decided that introducing a little bit of crime wouldn't go amiss. And of course, it's a beautiful town. So that's the first one. And the first book I wrote within that was Only the Dead. I had that published as well, self-published. I then wrote the next one, which was Hell's Gate. And through a sequence of events, I'd sent them to publishers, but had the usual rejection slips back. But there was a book blogger called Helen Clare, and I'd sent Hell's Gate to her asking if she would be kind enough to read it and possibly blog about it. At the same time, I'd sent the third book, which was Flesh Evidence, to a company. I'd never heard of Bloodhound Books. And I got an acceptance for that book. But they also said, we know you've got 3 other books. Could we have those? Now, I panicked then because Helen Clare was about to release a review on Hell's Gate. So I contacted her briefly. I just said, can you not do the review because a publishing house is wanting my books? And she said, I know they are because I've just signed to work for them and I've been talking about your book. They received your 3rd book, so I got a 3-book deal. And then later on, they liked the book, so I got a 7-book deal, but I didn't really think I could write 7 books. I'm now in book 13 or 14, so those original fears were soon quashed. So today I've decided that to start the reading, I would start with the first in the Merseyside series, and I start with the prologue for that. It was quite a range to write. I've been commissioned by a publishing house to write 3 books featuring female detectives, and I turned it down. And I then got the idea to work with on these 2, and I thought, well, I'm going to keep them and send them to a publisher because I'd like to work with a publisher again. So when I'd written the first 2, I then sent them away, and fortunately, Hollingdrake Books, a fairly new independent publishing house, accepted them. So, and they're doing very well, and I'm really pleased. And I'm contracted for 3 books with them. So looking forward, in the spring, I'm going to have a break from writing for a while because I think I've probably 4 books this year. And I just need to recharge batteries and see which direction I want to be going in. But let me read the prologue for this. And the story is set in Liverpool. There are a group of motorcyclists, a gang of motorcyclists who go around robbing scooters and bags and so on. But it links to a death on a body found on the beach. And this is all linked with smuggling and drug smuggling coming in on the liners. The prologue. The transparent perspex disc spun in the air, a flat earth launched skyward by finger and thumb to become a virtual rotating globe, a levitating optical illusion. The gilt dollar sign, easily read when static, was now a golden blur. To one of the men watching, time stood still as the spinning disc slowed, the sound going from inaudible to a deep, slow bass, almost sibilant, a stretched out drone comprising one instruction of 3 words. Heads or tails. The man tossing the disc moved his hand out in readiness to catch its fall. Eyes watched until it reached its apogee. After all, it belongs to you. For one man, this was not only a game of chance, it was, he knew, a matter of life or death. The disc landed on the outstretched gloved palm, and fingers immediately grasped it, hidden for what seemed like an age. Heads or tails, you incompetent, traitorous bastard. The guilty are always psychologically beaten before they begin, as more often than not, they are realized, possibly for some time, the true and frightening consequences of their unacceptable actions. There will be little resistance on their behalf in the hope that mercy will be shown, and their professional skills and their usefulness will be realised and hopefully valued within the culture of criminal brotherhood, where tolerance and forgiveness might thrive. Benevolence, however, only applies to certain misdemeanours. Treachery in any language is both insufferable and punishable. Now, the difficulty comes for anyone controlling this court is knowing how much force to use to gain the truth, as truth is often hidden by the very process of extraction. Pain will bring about an acceptance of guilt. History has taught us that. Imagine for a moment, if you can, a razor blade hovering close to your forced open eye. Did you take it? The inquisitor reassuringly asks this simple question. If you did, do you admit it or deny it? After all, you have another eye. In that position, what would you do? You are naked and tied to a stainless steel table, just as our man is here. Like you, his shoulders are positioned just over the edge, leaving his neck exposed and his head feeling too heavy. Strange hands are now supporting your head, keeping it still, immovable. In some ways, that is a relief, but in others, it is not. They are in full control. Now imagine, like him, that there is a light facing directly into your eyes, bright yet familiar, and if I were to be cynical, almost blinding. All you can see for the moment are silhouettes against the bright, contrasting blue. Initially, they are stationary, and then the figures move. There is the sound of rap music, loud and thumping. You can feel it vibrate through the cold of the metal table. You are terrified as you know you are guilty. You have no control over your bladder, and the wet warmth of your own urine seeps beneath you. There is laughter. You know, and more importantly, they know that you are a traitor. Never in your worst nightmares does this scenario exist. It cannot, as it is beyond the dreams of a law-abiding citizen. The nearest we have to this sheer terror is the panic we would experience if being attacked and eaten by a wild animal. The thought that there might be a shark beneath you in the dark water whilst you are open water swimming, or suddenly see a pack of rabid dogs on an unknown, dark and empty street. You feel fear, real fear. You would struggle to psych yourself to deal with those scenarios if they were real. And that intense fright is a form of torture on its own. Sadly for you now, those around you do not feel that way. There is a strange and unusual atmosphere, a frisson, an amalgam of your utter fear mixed with their pure enjoyment, a nerve-tingling excitement that is always there when human life is harmed, when pain is caused, felt, seen, and heard. A simple question, did you take it, might be the penultimate word you hear, and the answer to that question would be your last. To one person in the room, the silly game we have just played is not a game, and we see that the denouement is when the frightened and tormented human life is simply snuffed out. In many cases, it is to the relief of the one who answered that simple question with a one-word answer, yes. At that stage for them, life has ceased to matter and all pain has gone. This was not Armageddon. There is no good fighting evil in this war. Good, in fact, was never in the equation. For Sadiq and his master, it was just perfect. A thorn in the side had been extracted and he could now move on.
So thank you, Malcolm. That's very good. It's always lovely to hear an author read their own work. It gives it something else. That's based in Liverpool, yes? That's
based in Liverpool. I've used North Merseyside for that because Liverpool is split. The police in Liverpool is split. And so North Merseyside will include Ainsdale, Southport, Crosby, and that particular area. And so there's quite a lot of countryside mixed in with that. And when I created the detective team, they were based at Copy Lane, and I could link with my hometown of Wigan quite easily. And with lockdown and things like that, it made researching much easier. So traveling to Harrogate, which I do on a regular basis when writing a book, to actually walk the streets. So I will use Street View. I still like to go and check it out because so many changes can happen between the images appearing on Google Maps. So being in Liverpool, it's easier for me to get into Liverpool than it is to get into Wigan some days because of traffic. So to actually walk the streets of Liverpool is fantastic, and there's so much that. In fact, Southport and Liverpool remind me very much of Harrogate in the much that the historical architecture is just breathtaking, and it can be included, and it paints a perfect backdrop for the settings within the stories.
So walking the streets, do you do it at different times? Do it during the day and the evening, or?
On the evening, yes. If I'm writing a session a bit based on the evening, then I will use the evening walk, because you only get the true sense of that. And I do believe, although it is fiction, people do like to know and feel what it's actually like. And I get a lot of people contacting me and say, "Where's the Black Door in Harrogate? I'm standing here. How would I get to the Black?" And the Black Door was the door of an auction house, Morford's auction house. And I like that element, so I will use specific places. And in the latest book, in the latest Harrogate, I've used a garage which is owned by Stephen King Autos, which is perfect for what I was using for. So I contacted, "Can I use your garage for we don't kill anybody there, but it would be nice." And usually no problem at all. And I'll send them a copy of the book when it's finished.
Of course, yeah.
Which is lovely.
Yeah.
Although I have had one rejection. When I was in Harrogate, I went into a hotel and said, "Could I use your hotel?" And they said, you can describe the outside, but you cannot describe the inside." That's the only time.
Well, there you go.
So I used it.
So who do you read?
Who do I read? I don't read a great deal, to be honest. Although as a child, I loved the Dr. Sin series, the Russell Thorndike books, and that's why my second book in the Merseyside is actually called Sin, S-Y-N, after Dr. And it's all Dr. Sin. I don't know if you know Dr. Sin. Dr. Sin was the Scarecrow, and he was a vicar who dressed as a scarecrow to help the smugglers bring things in off the beach. So the Scarecrow would ride out at night, and the Scarecrow features quite is a key feature of Sin. My main reading used to be this gentleman, Robert Ryan.
Right, yeah.
And it's the only author I've ever followed and waited for the next book to come and ordered it straight away. I loved his series. I loved his war series. This one I picked again out of the bookshelves. And I thought, I started reading it yesterday and I got totally hooked in again. And since I read it.
It's good that you can go back to books, isn't it? It's good how you can do that. And you always miss things as you're reading it through. It's just different time, isn't it? Different mood at the time and so forth. So and
I think my opinion of books has changed too. Since being a writer, you can realise there's the subtleties that they have put in. And I know from my own writing career, from say the first book, Only the Dead, which was two real stories put together. And when I'd finished it, a friend whose opinion I trusted said, "Why don't you make this 2 books?" And I think I was so uncertain that I kept it as one book. Now, with the experience I have and the abilities that I have after writing this, I could make that into 2 books very, very easily. But you can't go back because, if you're a painter, your early work has a certain quality that you not get when you become experienced. And I'd like to think that people who read my books can see, not necessarily an improvement, that's the wrong word, a development maybe is the right word. A skill development as it comes through.
Very nice thing to say. Yeah. Talking arts and antiques, you like that yourself, and you've actually brought that into your books as well, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I collect a lot of northern artwork. I have particular favourites. In fact, I've just managed to buy a painting by a man called Huang, and he featured in one of my books. And I've been to a number of auctions trying to get one, and I've missed it every time. But I managed to get one about 4 weeks ago, so I'm thrilled. But that skill, that buying and selling at auction, I wanted to use as for DCI Cyril Bennett. And in every book, when I got my rights back from Bloodhound, I decided that on each book I would include a small section at the back on each artist mentioned within the book. So every book has a specific artist linked and mentioned Some are obscure, some are not. But it's nice if people do try just look them up and have a look at the work that they do. It puts the words again in perspective within the narrative. I think that's the way it should be.
Great stuff. So you've got quite a few pictures in your collection now, then, have you?
I have. In fact, every painting mentioned in the books, I've actually either owned or owned one from that particular artist.
Right.
And it's just, I don't know, it makes it very personal, and I just like that element too. And I like to think that readers will search out that person and have a look and enjoy what they do. And a favourite artist of mine is David Hockney, but I've never been able to afford one of his.
Yes. Well,
maybe one day.
You never know, you might have a blockbuster book at some point, and you might be able to then.
But I've got a character behind me which I bought at auction. This mask, this Hinder mask here,
right?
Which I absolutely adore. And again, it's those, you go to an auction to buy a painting, you see something, and you think, oh,
yes,
I'll have a do at that, and we managed to get it. So yeah, quite nice.
Are you ready to do another reading?
I am, and on this one, I'd like to do, as I said to you, the first 3 books were taken up by Bloodhound Books, and I thought that wasn't going to go then any further. So I thought, well, the next book I'm going to kill off one of the detectives. That's something I'd never done before, so I thought, well, this is something I'd have to learn to do. And I was going to kill off David Owen, who's Cyril Bennett's sidekick, and Debbie said, if you kill off David Owen, you've killed the series. So I thought carefully about it. So I thought I'll kill one of the other detectives instead. So I decided to do that. Now in in the first book, in Only the Dead, we meet Charles, who's a homosexual, a very, very powerful man who was smuggling kids out of Sierra Leone for blood diamonds. And the link comes through the doctor who was working with him, checking out the kids. Who lived in Richmond, and that's how the link came about. So they went to find him, and he managed to successfully. Doesn't capture him. Shall I get rid of that, or do I need to get? Oh, just click that, and then that's it. He escapes. So in this book, he comes back with vendetta to upset Cyril Bennett to get his own back, and he kidnaps a female detective, Liz. And in this scene, they're in a cell within a farm building, not far from Ramsgill, and he's trying to draw Cyril Bennett to the bait. Charles sat on the floor opposite the makeshift bed. Liz was propped in the corner, the rough blanket cocooning her. He looked at the chain that appeared from the side of the blanket before rising to a ring on the wall, a steel umbilical cord. He then noticed the scratchings. There were now 4 vertical lines crossed through, a tally of time. It was the name Cyril on which he focused. Standing, he moved over to the wall, stretched out a nail-varnished index finger before tracing the word. Each time he followed the letters, he applied more force until a finely manicured nail began to scratch and erase the lettering. Liz, sensing someone was close, barely opened her eyes. She remained motionless and afraid. Charles moved away, returning to the far end of the cell. He stared at the damaged varnish before smoothing the nail's rough edge with his other hand. Bitch. Bitch, she heard him whisper. I know you can hear me. I saw your eyes open and close. You can stop this pretense, otherwise I'll give you something that will make you sit up. Liz opened her eyes and focused on the man sitting opposite. His crossed legs, his bleached blonde hair seemed totally incongruous with his muscular build. We haven't been formally introduced, even though, my dear, I guess you could say that I know you intimately. He lifted his head and stared back. The endless depth of that stare made the hairs on her neck and arms tingle. Don't worry, ladies are not on my preferred menu. Liz immediately heard the alarm bell ring in her head. The fact that he was here, facing her in plain sight, telling her who he was, made her shudder. Why would he suddenly allow her to see him, know him? She instantly felt nauseous. It's all Bennett's fault. You're Cyril. He pointed to the mark where she had scratched his name, and she noticed that it had been totally defaced. We had a good business, steady, lucrative, bringing no harm to anyone. Years we ran it like clockwork. Tick, And then along comes Cyril Bloody Bennett. Liz shovelled uncomfortably on the bed, rattling the chain as she tightened the grip around her legs. Charles took from his pocket what appeared to be a piece of broken glass. He rolled it along the floor until it ricocheted off the side of the bucket before coming to rest between them. You'll not know what that is. No. You'll think it's a piece of worthless glass, a trinket. But then you don't know much, do you, dear Scraden? In fact, you know, fuck all. That, he pointed to the glass almost hidden in the dirt. That little piece of carbon is what's known as a rough diamond. Some people call them blood diamonds. How many people have died extracting these? It doesn't matter. The rebels control the diamonds, and you're either with them or you're rendered harmless. Harmless. Get it? Fuck, girl, you know nothing. Christ, if you didn't join the rebels, they removed your hands or your arms so you couldn't dig for stones or fight against them. Anyway, parents were happy to get their daughters out of the country, and we offered that service for small pouches of these. They believed their girls were going to help in family homes in Europe, safely away from the rapists and murdering youths of Sierra Leone. In some ways, that was true, but in others, it was from the frying pan into the fire. Liz took a deep breath, angered by both his arrogance and her weakness. Child prostitution, pornography, drug addiction, that's what you gave them, not the promise of a better life. Liz suddenly felt outrage drown her fear. She had seen what traffickers did to young lives. Charles was startled by the anger in her words. Oh, you judge me too soon. We gave them something that they or their parents didn't have and could never hope to have. Don't you lecture me. Don't you dare tell me you gave them hope. You sit there as if you're some kind of charity, some kind of benevolent God and Saviour. I've seen what happens to these children. It's happening all over Europe right now. People are taking advantages of those in dire need of assistance, desperate people who trust the words of those who appear to be in a position to help. All too sadly, they fail to comprehend the one human frailty that's ever present, and that's greed. Avarice in the eyes of many, including myself, is a sin. Think what good you could have done. Where this courage had come from, she would never know, but she was not one to listen to bullshit, no matter how tight a corner she was in. Whatever she said now would not change the outcome of her predicament. Maybe it would even accelerate whatever end she faced. Good. Good. I've never been good ever in my entire life. You've no idea what being sinful has brought me. Trinkets that are for the here and now. It's material wealth, not spiritual. It has no value other than to those who seek the same, the greedy and the selfish. You'll never take them with you. Come the day, you'll have exactly the same possessions as me, only you'll have the crippling burden of guilt. I despise what you've done to those human beings before me. I despise what you're doing to me. You'll never get me to bend or bow, no matter how much you frighten me. And yes, you do frighten me. You've hurt me and done whatever else to me. You might break me physically, but you'll never change the Liz that's in here. Charles clenched his fist and felt frustration build inside. Bennett will bend. He'll feel the crippling burden of guilt, and he'll carry it with him for the rest of his life. He will come, and I will crush him. He smashed a fist into the palm of his hand before standing to collect the diamond. Holding it between a finger and thumb, he admired the refracted coloured light. I'm not greedy. He tossed the gem into the bucket. I'm no different from the high street entrepreneur. I'm a businessman. I give people what they want and I take a fee. There's no difference. And now, goody two-shoes, they're queuing along the African coast, ready to pick like ripe apples. Life has become so much easier, and no matter what you say and what you do, it will never stop. Business is booming, bitch. He left the room, slamming the door. Hearing those few words, Liz knew that her life would never be the same again. The nausea returned, and she moved quickly to the bucket and vomited.
Very good.
Okay.
Again, is that out of experience of meeting people that's giving you the idea for that, or?
Usually it's a small idea that comes along, and I will then build on that. The idea for that book came from, again, an auction, seeing Charles Horner hat pins. I don't know if you know the long hat pins with the beautiful ends. And of course, in Victorian periods, they were used as not to take them out and use as weapons if need be on the streets. So I wanted to use the hat pin as a form of murder and form of killing. And that's the way Charles did it. Again, Charles Horner, the link through. And Cyril then realizes that Charles is after him and he wants to put himself in harm's way. But the nice thing about this book, it's allowed the psychological damage that I'm sure that officers and in fact servicemen feel when they see colleagues or friends harmed nearby. And it's been something that I've been able to use and utilize even to the latest book, Uncertainty of Reason. Cyril has a moment of reflection because he keeps a photograph of Liz in an empty filing cabinet within his room face down, and it's like in a tomb. So in certain moments he will go to it and bring this out, and her face is always the same. It's always smiling. It's the moment he remembers her, but it brings back that regret that he could save her when you possibly could. Although even all his colleagues say you did everything you could. And in fact, the darkest scene in that book is set in St Mary the Virgin Church in Ramsgill, and it's where my grandfather's and my grandparents' ashes are actually scattered, and it's about 100 yards from where my grandfather was born. So his whole life was start and finish in that cemetery, and leaning against a gravestone was Liz's body. And the gravestone is fascinating because the words carved on, I think if I can remember it, and I've not practiced, remember me as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I, as I am now, so you will be. Prepare yourself to follow me. That's carved on. That's carved on the gravestone, and I propped against it. And it's a stone I've seen since being a kid. And whenever I go, I always go. And strangely enough, it's leaning, and it's almost like a backrest of the chair.
Yeah.
Beautiful chair. Yeah. And the vicar allowed me to use it to actually go in there. I did a video of Harrogate, and that's on YouTube. But
wow. Great. So how would you describe your writing style? Are you a disciplined writer? Do you sort of set yourself, right, I'm going to write this amount of words today? Or
I like to think I will do 1,000 words a day, and I like to write every day if I can. And it might only be a short story, or it might be something away from the book I'm writing at the moment. And I've written, as I said, short stories are a real pleasure. I wrote one called The Penultimate Man, which was to do with the ending of the First World War. My great uncle died on the 26th of September 1918 after going through the war. And not the last man to die, but the penultimate man to die, I wanted to write this story about him. So I created a short story, and we did a performance at Harrogate Library. We had music, singers, and Nicholas Cam, the narrator who does my audiobooks for the Harrogate Crime series, actually came along and read it live. And we did it on the 10th of November, 1918, the penultimate day before armistice. And it's really moving. And it's probably, if I could take one piece of my writing with me, that would be the one that I would take. It just means a great deal to me.
I'm sure it does. Absolutely. Peter's actually got a question for you, if you don't mind me asking it for you here now.
That's all.
He sort of has been listening to you reading, and he feels that you sort of put yourself into the character. Is that how you sort of visualize it to write it?
Yeah, and somebody gave me some very good advice when I first started writing, and that was when you've written it, read it out loud. Become the person. And that allows you to develop that particular sentence or phrase or emotion that you want to convey within the writing very clearly. So I try to do that on everything I write. So I will video on here and read to the camera and then listen to it back. And if I feel it's how I wanted it to be conveyed within the story, then it's working. If not, I'll change it. I'll change the words and try again. But I think character is very important, isn't it? And that contrast between two characters in a scene can be quite critical, and it shows the strength and the weakness of the character. and how one gets over empowers the other, or is destroyed by the other one. And so yeah, it's nice to try and set myself, feel as though I am Cyril Bennett, or feel as though I am Charles, or whichever characters I'm writing. Even the female voice I find quite exciting to write. Right. And so Skeeter Warlock in the new series is a fabulous character, because she's a wrestler. She's a catch-as-catch-can wrestler. Now, catch-as-catch-can wrestling is a Wigan wrestling form. And we have a catch-as-catch-can, the Snake Pit, and they teach kids. But I went to a gym, Royce Banks, and when I did my research for that, and he advised me on the wrestling terms and so on. So it's good to go along and see it and smell it and be involved in it, and then you can write it, I hope, and do it justice.
Yeah, no, I think you do it justice. From what I can see from the reviews and so forth, people agree with that too. So you said you had a third reading, is that right?
I have, and this is from the latest book, Uncertainty of Reason.
Yep.
And this one comes out on the 1st of November, although the paperback copy is available now. And the reviews are now coming in, and I don't know if any other author feels the same way, but when I release a book, it's like putting your head above the parapet of the Somme, and you're just waiting for bullets to come shooting your way. And because you've lived with it for so long, you really lose direction of if it's good or not, or if it's better than the last work that I've done, or if the storyline, the plot is different. And so you don't know that until people you trust, your beta readers, come back and give you an honest opinion. And they're just coming back in now, and loving them. I got another one this morning from Susan Hunter, and yeah, it just inflates you. And you think, oh.
No, it's lovely that you've got a group that can do that for you and give that honest feedback for you. That's really good.
They're delightful. So this character here. We're now in Yorkshire again. We're actually in Bridlington on the coast, moving up to Scarborough, but it eventually comes back into Harrogate for this. So our main character is in pantomime, and he's just about to get sacked for a poor performance, or more than one poor performance. So let's go from there. It was unusual to walk home along the darkening early evening streets of Scarborough wearing theatrical makeup, a key feature of his trade. But then it was not every day you walked away from the job you loved, the job you believed to be your true vocation. The route from the station to his apartment on Cambridge Street would normally take 5 or 6 minutes, but on this occasion the journey was a blur. He was in limbo, replaying the early part of the day with a fermenting degree of anger and sadness. After any performance, the silence seemed crushing. It was a direct contrast to the shouts, the music, laughter and songs. Maybe it was the adrenaline release that dissipated too rapidly after the final curtain fell, creating a natural anticlimax. Maybe it was simply relief. Today, however, after this matinee performance packed with school kids and pensioners, it was treacly thick to the extent it made it difficult to breathe. He had not performed well, he knew that. Something someone had shouted early in the performance seemed to sap his confidence, and it did not go unnoticed. He knew it would not, and he was proved right. The director had soon entered the shared dressing room after the show. That was nothing out of the ordinary. She would breeze in, usually scattering positive words to many of the cast, but also sharing the occasional, more direct, private word to the odd one or two who might not have performed to the best of their ability. The debrief, to her at least, was often classed as director's jewels, constructive criticism, professional encouragement for personal development. But to the cast, they all considered it to be a dressing down. This particular afternoon, it was different. The words were neither subtle nor sensitive, and to many of the actors watching on, unacceptable. This was particularly significant to the person sitting in front of an illuminated mirror. A made-up face stared back like a disappointed yet confused Janus. Her words seemed more barbed as they were directed at him. They were neither quiet nor subtle in their delivery. To the man staring back in the mirror, they were cutting, cruel, and unnecessary. He started to slowly count in his head to calm his growing anger. On completion, he had stood, turned to face her, and had accidentally fallen towards her. She took hold of him and he held on to her. "You've not been drinking." She released her hold and he straightened. The exaggerated, painted, deep red pout had betrayed his inner emotions throughout the whole of the dressing down, but in some ways it conveyed his true disdain. Others turned away, embarrassed for their fellow thespian. To the one man, the taller of the two ugly sisters, the words seemed to echo repeatedly within the cavernous blackness that now occupied his headspace. They were like sharp hammer blows, each finding their target with an unnerving degree of accuracy that slowly crushed him, making him see red. Matters were not improved as she pointed a finger inches from his face. That was to prove the last straw. He saw his father's red face, ugly in anger, appear within his mind's eye. "What's the bloody matter with you recently? You're supposed to be evil. You're supposed to be booed and hissed. You're not supposed to be funny and kind and have kids like you. And what's with the voices? If I'd wanted an impressionist, I'd have booked one." The staccato statements came like blows, one after the other. "And to make matters worse, you needed too many prompts. Where's your head these days? You were never like this before, never." She shook her head and leaned against the long dressing table that ran down one wall, a shrine filled with good luck and thank you cards, flowers and makeup. "You've had a mixed bag of performances lately, and I'm not happy with such poor acting. You're sacked. Stansfield can cover your role." For a moment, he was a child again, and he flinched, expecting a clenched fist to crash against his chest. When it did not, he grew in confidence. "Stansfield? You're replacing me with Stansfield?" His words spilled from the rouged lips as the thought lingered longer than was healthy. Tearing off his blue bouffant wig, he threw it directly into her face. We all have bad days, even you. I've been in the acting profession for years, and as directors go, you're no Alfred Hitchcock." He mimicked Hitchcock's slow, monotonous voice, bringing a few giggles from the others within the room. Her anger flared. "And remember, no one will die because of the occasional bit of bad acting, or directing for that matter. How many curtain calls did we get? 2? Some people are never satisfied." She left, face flushed, her words ringing from down the corridor. "Make sure you leave what's ours and take what's yours and be gone, do you hear?" A silence followed, but was soon replaced by giggles and laughter. "Ignore her, we do. Remember, we all have bad performances now and again." Arms wrapped around his shoulders, but the anger was still simmering. He opened his closed fist and revealed a key. "She'll be looking for this when I'm gone." "From her pocket, just then?" "Clever." Multiple voices asked various questions. He nodded, changed quickly, and left the theatre, refusing offers of coffee or beer, and tossed the key into the bin. He put a finger to his lips. "Our secret, the bitch." Leaving the stage door, a voice followed him. "See you at the flat." He raised a hand in acknowledgement as he was met with a chill breeze from the sea that seemed to channel down the street. He needed to get home. Still made up, he walked to the railway station. Being an ugly sister, all green eyeshadow, beauty spot and wrinkles, dressed as a man sitting opposite surprised travellers for the 35-minute journey, turned out to be the one bright spot of the late afternoon.
Very good. I loved pantomime when I was younger. Did you go to pantomime when you were younger?
No, I didn't.
Oh, yes, you did. No, the old coach trips to different places. Because I was living down south then. I can remember going to the old playhouse in Salisbury.
Right.
A couple of times for pantomime. It was like a one yearly trip out to the theatre. So, what are your thoughts on theatre and stage at the moment after COVID and so forth?
Well, I'm not vaxxed, so going places is going to prove very difficult. I've just turned down 2 concerts because I refused to stick something up my nose to go actually into a theatre, and I will have a vaccine when it's done its due diligence and it's been through all the processes. I don't want to be used as a guinea pig, thank you. And I had a very close friend who lives 2 doors down who died straight after having the first vaccine. So I have mixed feelings. Unfortunately, I live with somebody who has exactly the same feelings that I have. But not to get political about it, but that's the reason. But strangely enough, my wife is coaching a great niece for English, and she's doing Blood Brothers. And I've never seen Blood Brothers,
Right.
and I don't have a television at home, and so on YouTube we managed to find the whole thing is on YouTube under the other one. And so we watched part of that last night as she sat next to me making notes ready for this teaching tomorrow. And I was absolutely captivated by it.
Oh, it's an amazing.
Oh,
I've seen it twice, and it's fantastic. It was the second time was with Stephen Dennis from Neighbours, and I'm not a Neighbours fan or anything like that, so I was a bit worried about what it would be actually like. But he was fantastic. You know,
that's stunning, and it's set here, of course. It's set just down the road in Skelmersdale. From Liverpool to Scam, which is the
that's right, yeah.
And I don't think I've been as riveted to something for such a long time. Absolutely, and it wasn't a particularly clear recording for the sound was good, but the vision wasn't particularly good. But it didn't seem to matter, you know.
Yeah, it's one of the, as you rightly say, I don't think there's ever really been anything on the TV of Blood Brothers. I don't think you're right. I think it's purely theatre, but the 2 times I saw it was fantastic. I'm thoroughly recommend anybody to go and see that. That's definitely.
I think sometimes it's better to see it on theatre. I think some theatre should go. I remember seeing a joke actually this week about books. You know, they tear a few pages out of a book and then make it into a film or whatever. And yet there's nothing that's more captivating than sitting down and engrossing yourself in a good book. The same with going to live theatre or a live concert. And
again, yeah, I'd agree, because you do sort of lose yourself in that moment, don't you? When you're reading a book or you're in a theatre or listening to a concert or whatever, you are losing yourself in that moment.
And I think we need
anywhere,
that.
couldn't you?
Yeah, I think we need that. We need that more than ever now. And when we talk about mental health issues for people, and we have been through one hell of a number of months, haven't we? To go out and be sociable and sit next to people and discuss what's gone on and on screen or on the stage is just wonderful. And although I said there was only the 2 of us, we both were actually amazed. Debbie had seen it before, but I never had. So.
No, that was a good thing out of the first lockdown. There was quite a few London plays and that were actually put on free of charge. There's a couple from the Globe, etc. That you probably, somebody like me living really up north, would never get the chance to go down there on a regular basis. So it's good to actually be able to do that on the. Hopefully, it's got a new audience through that as well. And it's, you know, I think schools should be able to go and see these sort of productions. I saw Macbeth the first time down in Poole. I can remember when I was at school, for example, and really wasn't into Shakespeare at that time. Really, I think the only Shakespeare I really got on with was Merchant of Venice when I was at primary school, and that's only because I had a crush on the teacher at the time. But that you know, I could love or leave Shakespeare really, but I think you can come back to it as an adult and you do see it in a different way.
I think so. And I think we've reached periods in our time. It's like classical music to popular music. There are certain times in your life where it becomes more important. We go through stages, and classical music fills a certain gap that we often need, and it's the same with radio now. I can't cope with Radio 2 at times because it's always ring in and tell us what you can see out the window or what you've had for your breakfast. And I really don't want to know what people have had. I want to be entertained, and so I'll often now go to Radio 4 Extra. Yes. And some of the old programme, I mean, Hancock's Half Hour and Steptoe and Dad's Army, as a radio play works so well. Yeah. And you can actually do something while you can do 2 things. I know it's difficult for a man, but I can do 2. You can listen to the radio and the play, and also do
something else. Very true.
And I value that.
Have you ever thought of writing a stage play at all, or have you written for the stage?
No, I haven't. No, no. I think I know my limitations at my age, and I
Mm.
think I think if I can keep writing books and I can write short stories,
Mm.
I can. Then I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I make leaded windows, and I've just got a commission for another leaded window.
Wow. Okay.
I was working on the design, and that was accepted by the person yesterday. So it'll be a case of choosing colours and then leading it or cutting it and leading it, and
Wow.
so yeah.
Okay. So you've got quite a few strings to your bow on that side.
You've got to keep
Collecting the art and actually producing it as well, which is, well, there you go. Interesting. So I would imagine now you're starting to hopefully get invites to now do physical events again, aren't you?
Yeah, I had two, but they were cancelled again through lack of numbers, because you have to have a certain number to make it viable. You don't want to say two authors, because Caroline England and myself are working with Wigan Libraries, but you don't want two authors to one member of the community, sitting in the office. But I used to organise every year the Wigan Law, which was held in the Victorian Law Courts. And we used to fill that. We used to sell out every year, and we had people like Mike Craven, Paul Finch. We had some great authors. Carla Kovacs came up, and they were great. And we also then did it in Harrogate Library, and so I think I was on the third in Harrogate Library and fourth in annual Wigan Library. We were getting quite a few sponsors now, sort of Uncle Joe's Mint Balls and the printing firm. Did all that.
It all helps on that side, because having done it at a very low key level with the Lit Festival, which is basically my baby, really. It was just my idea, and it was a case of just inviting some local authors to come and read in various different libraries and church halls and that sort of thing, really. Yeah,
Well,
a lot of organisations just at that level, let alone then trying to encourage other people through. And I always have to say to people, I just haven't got any money to pay you travelling even.
No,
you can come and flog your books, but I'm not a major literature festival, but I am very passionate about promoting authors of all shapes and forms, if you know what I mean.
Well, we're very grateful.
Love the libraries and the independent bookshops as well. There is room for Amazon as well, and I think they do a very good job. But I think we need to also try and support the local independent bookshops as well and the libraries.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again, without Amazon, there are certain authors, like particularly myself, when I came away from the general publisher. Without Amazon, I would have just thrown them all in the bin and said, that's it. But you have to have Amazon. And I was with a local bookshop, Harrogate bookshop. And because I originally were printed through, they still came through Amazon, but I used to take them over and leave them and say, sell or return. And I think I was her number one seller for 1 year. But when I said, can I get them to deliver to your shop? You can't have Amazon coming to the shop. Let's be realistic, we're all adult, they're going to come from somewhere. But so all my books now, she doesn't sell any of my books at all in the independent. And you need some tolerance. You need a degree of tolerance.
Well, I think we can't be in a bubble. I like to support the independent, but you can't have one without the other.
No, that's right.
And I think also now we're in the modern world with the technology and so forth. People are all over the world. They can still get your books, whether they're in Canada or Australia or in Harrogate or whatever.
Well, the argument used to be that you're cutting out the footfall going to her shop, passing other shops. But then you find that they then set up their own system whereby you ring up and they will send the book to. So, internet booking books from a bookshop, an independent bookshop, to me defeats the object. You may as well. You're just a smaller Amazon, in my opinion. You're emulating what they do. Yes. The whole point of an independent bookshop is going in, talking, looking and browsing, and having that whole experience, which I think is fantastic.
It's the experience, isn't it? Absolutely, I agree with you. That's why I didn't really like the Waterstones in the cafe. I like it where independent had a cafe.
Yes.
I think Waterstones just added the cafe, if you know what I mean, rather than for a particular experience reason, really. But there's a couple of decent bookshops. Barter Books is a classic example of that, just over the Northumberland border there. And it's an old railway station, It's just a lovely building, and literally it's the experience is literally spending the 3 or 4 hours looking around, and they've got new books, but they've got plenty of old and second-hand books as well, and there's a market for everybody in there.
There's one. Go on, I was going to say there's one in Southport that's very much like that, over I think 3 or 4 floors, but they have an open fire.
Yes, exactly. We can sit down and actually
surrounded by books, and you think,
yes, yeah, no, it's similar. Yeah, like have big armchairs. You can actually sit down and actually start to have a read of a book before you decide to buy it.
yes,
you're in that kind of ambience of a place to do it. It's lovely. You know,
well, a library setting in a bookshop is perfect, isn't it? You know, it's fantastic. And what a better way if you're out in town just to go and have 15-20 minutes and just enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Malcolm, I've thoroughly enjoyed that. I hope you have too.
I have indeed. I'm grateful, and thank you for I'm sorry about the technical issues.
that again is part and parcel. We got there in the end, I think. And the good thing about this is it's been streamed to YouTube, so it's there recorded, so people can catch up later if they wish. So feel free, if you want to take the link and put it onto your website or page or whatever, feel free to do that. And you are more than welcome, and you know I've got the books in the Cuppa Facebook group. You're welcome to post in there anytime about your books, etc. And I just wish you all the best for the future, and we'll keep an eye out for more and more books, and hope this next one is a success and will lead on to more and more.
Fingers crossed. He's had the best pre-order sales from any of the books I've had, so I'm delighted with that. So
that's really good to hear. So thank you very much for your time, Malcolm.
Well, thank you. Thanks for all you do for authors. It's very important, and I know I do appreciate it very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Well, we both help each other really. If you weren't writing the books, we wouldn't have it to chat about and promote. So we help each other. So thank you very much for your time. So we'll call it a day at that point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
And you, sir. Take care.
Thank you.